sis, you are more than your past choices. You get to choose what intimacy looks like for you. So I want to give you permission in this reclamation to reclaim your sex story, to explore what pleasure is and feels like without guilt, to say yes when your body, spirit, mind, and soul align, and to say no when it doesn't, to change your mind, to relearn what you enjoy, and to be curious about your desires. Hey, y'all. I hope you had an amazing day, and I'm so glad to see you back. As you know, you're listening to Xpose H.E.R, the show that brings seductive conversations about trauma and intimacy to the forefront. I'm Juliet Wise, your host. Today we're talking about something serious, y'all. Something vulnerable, something exposed once again, but it's chasing connection, losing myself, what nobody told me about the first time. And when I'm talking about the first time, I'm talking about the first time I had sex, the first time I connected, and things I wish I really would have known. All right, so y'all ready for this conversation? Let's get into it. Let me ask you something, sis. Have you ever made a decision with your body that your heart wasn't ready for? Like, have you ever made a decision based on things you're hearing in your environment, based on, I don't know, something somebody is whispering in your ear? And so your heart wasn't necessarily ready for it, but you made that decision for your body? I know I have. When I think about my story, y'all, it's not necessarily a bad story, but I remember being a young girl sitting on the grass with some friends. And we were sitting across from the school. We used to sit on this hill after school. And so we're sitting on this hill, and one of my friends, she was more sexually advanced than the rest of us, and she was telling us about all her sexual experiences. Now, was it interesting to me to hear? Yeah, but I wasn't necessarily all into it. It was just fun to listen to. But one thing in that conversation that stuck in my mind is, it was a joke at the time, but she was like, Julia, you ain't gonna never have sex because you too much of a time. Ain't nobody going to want to have sex with you. Can you believe that? So in my mind, I sat there and I thought about it, and I was like, but why wouldn't nobody want to have sex with me? You know, the funny thing is, as I think about it and I'm talking to you, maybe I was a little competitive at that time. Because the crazy thing is, I hadn't even thought about having sex. I wasn't thinking about losing my virginity. I wasn't in this space of feeling like this is what I want to do right now. It was fun talking about things. Of course, I like boys. You know, we used to play little games like grip and all this stuff. I don't know if y'all know what that is, but running around hitting each other on the butt. Of course, that probably wasn't appropriate, but it was fun to me. But I never had really had a conversation with any adult about having sex. So in my brain, I was like, I'm going to make a decision, and I bet you I'll have sex by the end of this summer. So what did I do? I decided I was going to have sex. I wasn't going to be left out. The crazy thing is, I reflect on it right now, I had never even been thinking about wanting to have sex. I like playing games, like we would play grip and all these different games running around. But my conversations with none of the boys I had been with had ever been about having sex. I mean, at all. I wasn't in a relationship. I wasn't in a position at that age where I really cared about relationships. I love talking about boys. I love talking about different things. We always had fun sitting on our little hill talking about different things. But when I heard her story, and the one word that stuck out to me was, because you're a tomboy, nobody's going to want you. And that's the other part that stuck out, was that nobody's going to want me. And I didn't realize then, but when I reflect on it now, that's what led my decision. Of course, after that, I told myself I was in love with him. And I believed I really did think I was in love with him. I used to send him letters, and, you know, I had made up this whole imagined love story in my head. But let me not play myself, because at that time, I really and truly thought I was in love with him. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, I didn't give my virginity to him. I'm in love with this man or boy, because we were children. I'm in love with this boy, and so we must have this connection. I remember being so heartbroken when I wasn't getting letters back. I was just like, oh my gosh. But the crazy thing is, even when I'm talking to y'all about it now, I don't think there was no big connection. It was just, okay, we had sex, so then therefore I'm supposed to be connected to him. Therefore, I'm supposed to have this big connection, so I'm supposed to be writing him letters. We're supposed to be saying I love you. We're supposed to be having this, but there was no build up to that. I didn't know that boy before the summer started. I had just met him at the program that we would go to during the summer. But when I look back, y'all, I realized that I was craving attention. And it's weird because I'm trying to just phrase this correctly so there's an accurate story. Not craving necessarily attention from him, but an acceptance, and not wanting to be in a space where I was the only one, or I was the one that nobody wanted. You know what I think about when I think about that time period and what I try to do with my daughter? I feel like if there were more conversations had about sex with adults, I tell my daughter all the time, don't be going to your friends for advice about sex. They ain't had sex. I have, clearly. I have you. They don't know nothing. They out here experimenting, my bad. And then it's probably not good, because when you first start having sex as a virgin, it is not this grand experience. It hurt a little bit. And so I tell my daughter, talk to me about sex. Let me give you education about sex. Let me answer your questions because I have the information and I want to be there for you so that we can be a part of this conversation together. Y'all, does this sound familiar to you? It may not. But what was your experience like losing your virginity? Like, did you lose your virginity early? Was it a special occasion? Did you happen to have adults that actually talked about sex to you but didn't talk about it in a way that was so demonized or scared you into going to hell if you had sex, or made you feel like if you had sex you were going to get STDs? Of course we know that all of those things, well, not all of those things, but was there fear tactics used in teaching you about sex? What do you wish they would have taught you? What do you wish the conversations would have been? I know I wish that I could have just asked some questions. Like, what does sex feel like? Why do people have sex? What should I want to understand about boys? What should I want to understand about relationships? I didn't have the opportunity to do that. So I was learning a lot of that from my friends, okay? So if you ever had questions about sex, you feel like you had sex too early, if you carried some shame regarding having sex, if you feel like even as an adult now, you have some questions that you never got to ask and you're too embarrassed to ask and it shows up in your relationship. If any of these questions are for you, if you lost your virginity as an adult, but you still didn't have the questions then, or you did have a great experience losing your virginity, but you still got some questions and you never had people to ask, y'all, this episode is for you. When I think about my understanding of sex, I really feel like the way sex was taught was in a fear-based way. It wasn't taught with any form of consciousness. And I don't necessarily blame the generations that came before with the way they taught, but I don't feel like in church and in the little groups we were in and things we went to, it was taught in a safe and healthy way. So when I was growing up, the message about sex was loud in one way and painfully silent in another. I feel like the underlying message was, don't have sex or you're going to go to hell. Don't have sex or you're going to get an STD. Don't have sex or nobody will want you. Don't have sex or you will no longer be pure. What else? Can y'all think of some? Don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex. But no conversation about when you decide to have sex or if you decide to have sex, it's important that you learn to connect. So the message is being, don't have sex or you're going to get an STD. That was one everywhere. We went to camps, teach us how to put condoms. You know what? They did teach us how to put condoms on a banana. Now, I think that was actually a positive message because when they were teaching us to put condoms on the banana, I feel like they were actually being in a realistic place of these kids might have sex. Even though we don't want them to have sex, they might have sex. But I remember it being such a debatable space being in there because that was never a place where conversation had been had. But actually, as I was talking to y'all, that memory coming up was actually pretty good because I think it was good that they were teaching us what to do if we did have sex and not just scaring us to death with pictures of chlamydia and STDs and all of these different things. But I feel like the painfully silent part was, don't have sex or you're going to go to hell. I mean, damn. So if you're telling me that if I have sex, I'm going to go to hell, even though I don't know, I can't say that was directly the message that was said, but hell, that's what it felt like. So if that is the message, then silently, I have doomed myself to hell if I have lost my virginity, even if it's subconscious. Because I don't necessarily remember feeling like that when I was a teenager. But when I think about it as an adult, that's what it felt like. Oh my God, I'm the worst person. There's so much shame. There's so much this. There's so much the other. And in addition to that, if I've had these sexual experiences, then I'll never be worthy of a good man. I don't remember in my experience ever it feeling like the men were giving the same message, right? No woman is going to ever want you if you spreading your seed everywhere. No woman is going to ever want you if you trying to break everyone's virginity. I don't remember that ever being the message. But it was sure clear for a woman that if you lose your virginity, then you will not be worthy. You will have a scarlet S on your chest because you should not be breaking your chastity and you should not be giving your body to anybody else. I feel like that message is beyond duplicit, right? I feel like we were handed fear rather than understanding. And I feel like that is like one of the most dangerous ways that you can teach somebody something is handing them fear instead of understanding. A lot of us just needed understanding, right? When we talk about different things that I talk about on this podcast, when we're talking about sexual trauma, you're talking about being touched early, or even if you didn't necessarily experience sexual trauma, but you're learning about things. You need understanding, like a safe place to ask questions. I feel like I was told what not to do, but I was never asked, what are you feeling? What makes you want to connect to someone else? I feel like those are kind of natural questions, right? But those are not questions that I was asked. I don't even know, as I talk to you, if there was a space that I felt those questions would ever be asked, or if I could ask those questions. When I think about my experience, I know my experience is just my personal experience and I can't put it on anybody else, but I wonder what other women's experiences were when they were learning about sex. Who taught you about sex? Who taught you about your body? Who taught you about how your body experiences things? Did you even really know how your body worked before you did sex education, or what was that class? I think it's called sex education in in college, right? That was the first time I remember actually having a class where you're actually talking about sex, talking about what your body does, being able to look at different pictures. And it doesn't make sense to me that in college, I feel like in college was the first time that I was actually understanding the mechanics of the body. Still experimental, still wanting to understand things about sex and learning it on my own and from my friends, which is detrimental. But that was the first time I was actually getting some book knowledge and a teacher that could answer questions without being so uncomfortable. You know what I think, y'all? I really think that sometimes in Christian homes, our parents are probably uncomfortable talking about sex. They even may have experienced their own sexual experiences, but have shame related to it because they were taught that. So we have this generational disruption of how we're teaching each other about sex. And then therefore, the whole thing that we're hoping to counter or prevent is counterproductive because you're not having no conversation. You're not having any space where you're teaching a level of understanding and where it's safe to just talk about these things before you're stopped and saying, no, you can't do these things. No, you're not supposed to do these things. It's too early for you to be discussing those things, because that's clearly not true. It's not never really, especially when you get in those teenage years, if your child wants to know things, they need to have a safe space, because I really feel like I needed a safe space to be able to have these conversations. The bad thing, y'all, about silence is the silence leaves us in a space, left me in a space where you're only getting your answers from your peers. You're only getting your answers from the boys. You're only getting your answers from secrecy. And when you think about it, those are not any answers at all. When I think about my sex story, I often tell my clients, what is your sex story? Where did your sex story begin? Why is it so important? Because when we start understanding where our sex stories began, we're better able to understand our sex story now. How did I learn to connect? Did I learn that sex was just transactional? For me, I remember as I was having sex growing up, I wanted connection. So each time if I had sex, I equated it with love. That wasn't a reality, but I wasn't getting that connection in regards to attachment and nurturing. I was trying to find it somewhere else based on my own definitions and based on my friends. So I was reading this book, and it's called H.E.R. Inside the Evangelical Movement That Shamed a Generation of Young Women and How I Broke Free. This is by Linda K. Klein. In H.E.R., Linda gives a voice to so many of us who were raised in purity culture. She describes how fear-based teaching used shame to control, especially the sexuality of girls. We were taught that our bodies were stumbling blocks and our sexual thoughts were sinful, and that we were responsible for actions of boys and men. Do you all see how damaging that is? When we're taught that the way I dressed, if I have my boobs showing, or if I wear something short, or if I got a whole sheet on, a black sheet that's covering my whole body, and somebody over there is attracted to me, someone over there feels like they're attracted to me sexually, then it is my fault that they are attracted to me. In one chapter, she writes, "We were taught that we were worth more if we had never been touched. That our value diminished with every sexual thought, every flirtation, every moment we felt desire." I realized how much I carried that throughout the years. And it was a subconscious thing because I didn't necessarily carry it in the forefront of my life, especially during my teenage years. I think about how it subconsciously impacted me, this purity culture message. Because I knew that I had had different sexual experiences, whether it was penetration or not. And so I remember like writing down, trying to make sure I didn't go over a certain amount of people that I slept with. You know how sometimes niggas be asking or men be asking, okay, well, or they used to. I don't know if people do that as grown folks. If they do, it's a mess. But how many people have you slept with, right? And so then the message was that if you slept with this many people, then your value is diminished. Now, let's be clear. I'm not saying that sexual liberation represents sleeping with all these people, because that's not my definition of sexual liberation at all. But what I am saying is when you go throughout life not necessarily knowing what true sexual liberation is, not necessarily truly understanding what sacred connection is, not necessarily understanding that your desire to have sex is not sinful, it's natural within your body, and you start having sex before you understand these things. If the message that you've been taught is connected with your value is diminished, you have the scarlet S on your chest now, you will not be worthy of a husband, subconsciously it's possible that you start believing that message. And I know in some ways that I did. It's weird because there was so many messages conflicted in there, and that's why these episodes are so like, although they're here for you, it's so healing for me, because when I talk about it, it's like, wow, you had a lot of little messages in there. Okay, so there's some messages related to sexual abuse, then there's some messages related to desiring connection, but then there's other messages related to, am I supposed to desire connection because I had sexual abuse, or is my desire for connection based on that? Because for many years, y'all, I thought that I liked to be sexually touched in the way that I did because of my abuse. But as I've gone through my own therapy and different things like that, I realized, no, I like connection. I like sensory touch. I like the touch. I love to be connected, but also when it was in an unhealthy space, I wanted a different form of connection. I needed to fill a void. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be held. I wanted to be touched. I think I said that already. And so as I've learned over time, it was so many little messages in there. And if we don't understand how we have all these little messages in there, we won't truly understand our sex story. My sex story is convoluted, but I'm okay with my, excuse me, I'm okay with my sex story now because I understand it better. I understand why I carried shame, and my shame was like a tree with roots at the bottom because it was connected to different things. Now, did I walk around like I was carrying shame? No. Did everybody know my story? No. Did some people possibly? Yeah. Now, was I out there just having sex with everybody? No, I was not. But I was having sex. And what I wanted to be able to have, well, what I needed now when I look at my adult self and go look back at my inner child or my teenage self, is I wish she had me. I wish she had me to say to her, hey, Tanya, man, talk to me about sex. Tell me what these boys are you liking. Tell me why you're interested in them. Tell me what's the plan. Like, what leads up to you ending up having sex? Like, tell me where it is, because is there any connection? Is there a relationship there? Do you know what a relationship is? When you're having sex, are you actually enjoying sex? Do you want to know more information about sex? Are there fears that you have related to STDs? These are all things that are so important in our sex story, because if we don't know them, I'm not saying you have to all go back like I did, but when you understand them, you're able to understand your development over time. And yes, did I start learning how to have good sex? Yes, but did I learn how to have connected sex? No. Did I learn how to understand the sacredness of my body? No. Did I truly think that I was beautiful? No. Did I even fathom the idea of being beautiful? No, it wasn't even in my head. Because in the beginning, as I told y'all in the beginning of my sex story, all I saw was that I was a tomboy and that I needed to have sex so people wouldn't see me as a tomboy. It's weird how little things stand out in your head. I remember that one thing standing out in my head, and I remember this one boy making fun of my voice, talking about my voice was too horsey and I sounded like a man. So that narrative started playing in my head, and I started thinking that nobody would want me, so I've got to prove that someone will want me. It's so weird saying that out loud right now because I don't think that I even realized that during that time. So y'all, here's some of the conversations that we should have been having as kids. Conversations that Christian parents, if you're listening, maybe think about having it with your child. You don't have to say it, have to say it the same way that I say it, but regardless of if you say it or not, these kids are going to get the information from somewhere. So it'd be great if they could get the information from you. Okay? Here are some of the things. Sexual desire is not sinful. It's a part of being a human being. All right? Here's what happens in your body when you are aroused. It's okay to feel that. You have the right to ask questions. You have the right to say yes or no. What I realized the other day, I was talking to my daughter about date rape. And I was like, thinking about it, I was like, wow, this is one of the most difficult ones to break down, at least for me. If you have some suggestions of how you have explained date rape to your teens, hey, I'm here with it. But I was thinking about how you have to understand relationships. You have to understand your boundaries. You have to understand where you're going to be to understand how to best keep yourself in a safe place. But what scared me about that conversation is what if? Because there's many situations where you've done all of those things and you can still encounter that space of date rape. And that is one of the most scary things, but that's not what this episode is about. I digress, but it brought it up for me because our teens and our young adults and even us as grown women have to be able to understand you have a right to say yes or no, no matter where you are in the sexual process. Because a lot of times, I know back in the day with me, if I had started messing around a little bit, then I would think that I could not now turn back because I had learned that if I tried to turn back, then they might take it anyway. So I want to be in charge of allowing myself to know when it's going to be taken. But in that space, I did not want to continue, but I was afraid because of other experiences. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that that person I was with was going to do that. But in my brain and in my nervous system, the protective capacity in me said, you might as well go for it because you don't want to experience them taking it because that will feel worse. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Another one is healthy relationships are built on trust, not fear. It's not a fear of having sex. It's not a fear of getting an STD. It's not a fear of if everybody will talk about you. It's not a fear of messing up your reputation. All of those things are real things that can happen. But it's the way that they're taught that interrupt our understanding of connection. If all of those things are taught in a way where don't have sex because you're gonna mess up your reputation, don't have sex because you're gonna be dirty, you're gonna have scarlet S on your chest. If it's taught in all of those ways, it's not teaching me what my body really is worthy of. It's not teaching me how my body was created. It's not teaching me anything but to be afraid. Another one, God created your body with purpose and pleasure, and that doesn't have to be a scary thing. Another thing is to say there are reasons people choose to wait for sex. That goes beyond God not loving you. That goes beyond God being upset with you. It just is a space of them understanding their bodies and who they want to share it with, when they want to share it, if they have the emotional maturity to connect with somebody yet, if they truly understand the connection that comes in that space of sex. That's bigger than a disease. That's bigger than God not loving you. That's bigger than your reputation. It's truly understanding connection and what sex was created for. How beautiful that connection could be. Even in my language, when I'm talking about it right now, it feels so much more peaceful when it's not beat over your head that if you do this, then this. But let me tell you about the beautiful story that can come with sex. The beautiful story that sex was made to come with. And I want to share with you things that can happen if you're not doing that in the healthiest way. But I don't ever want you to be afraid that God won't love you as a result of you deciding to have sex, or if you've had different sexual partners, or that you're dirty or anything like that. Those are the ways that we needed to learn about sex, and that we still have the opportunity to teach our children about sex. So let's try to reframe this, y'all. Instead of saying, just don't have sex before marriage, why don't we ask them, what does emotional safety feel like for you? Do you know how to tell when someone actually respects you? Instead of saying or us thinking or indirectly communicating, if you have sex, nobody will want you. If you have sex, your body will be tainted. If you have sex, it's going to be harder for you to get married. Why don't we say, your worth doesn't change based on what you've done or what's been done to you? Let's talk about it more, right? instead of saying purity is virginity, which we all know is a lie, because a lot of the people who was walking around trying to act like they was virgins was doing everything but having sex, right? We could say your purity is the posture of your heart. Does that make sense to y'all? So let me tell you why these messages are important. They're important because when we speak to one another's hearts, we provide a space of compassion and love and emotional connection. When you're connecting with a heart and you're saying, okay, let's reframe the way these messages were taught. If you're an adult, you can go back and teach your teenage self that, or even your adult self that. You could teach yourself that, wait a minute, there was more compassion that should have come in this space. There was more understanding. I wish I would have had a space to ask questions, you guys. And when you start understanding that compassion, that softness that you have with yourself, now you're on the path to connecting emotionally in an intimate way. If you started out having sex early, it's possible that you had some emotional connection, but I can only speak for myself. I don't necessarily know how much of the emotional connection that I had was real. And the thing about it, in the developmental stage that we're in, if I'm starting to have sex at 15, my brain hasn't even fully developed as a teenager. And so I'm not really truly understanding what that emotional intimacy is. I'm starting already at below half point because I don't have an understanding of it. But the thing about it, it's not like we can go back and get that person physically and tangibly. What we can do is say, okay, if I started having sex at this time and if it had any impact on my life and my sexual experiences going forward, not even necessarily bad impact, but what if I get ashamed of talking about when I lost my virginity? Because I know that was a shameful space for me too, because there's so much shame baiting in the space of sex. There's so much shame in conversations in our church environments, and it's so damaging. But if we were able to understand that we could just talk about sex and that we could understand it from an emotional connected place, we're able to ask those questions, we're able to use those reframes, then we most likely will have a healthy development. And even if we go and have sex and we feel like, oh, maybe I wanted to wait a little bit longer, you're not feeling that, oh my gosh, I'm the worst person in the world, or oh my goodness, I'm going to go to hell, or oh, I should wear the scarlet S on my chest, or oh, I'm dirty, or oh, nobody's wanted me. Girl, do you know how frustrating it has been to me over the years how these men can go out and have sex in the church? They can be the biggest perverts in the world. They can do all these different things, but that woman is held accountable for all the things that they do. It's crazy. Even when I talk about it out loud, I almost feel like shy to say it. And it's weird to think about because this is the way that environment has been taught. It's this, what is the word I'm looking for? It's a chauvinistic way of thinking. I can't think of the other word, but if you're watching, you probably think of the word. It's like women are held responsible, even if you have sex out, not even just sex outside of marriage, but like me, have a child before you get married. Or at times where my mom had us outside of marriage, and then she's the one that's got to be rebaptized. But nowhere in that space do you see these men being held accountable, or did you see? Because I think that things are shifting and more people are being held accountable, but not really. But nowhere in that space did you see that men being held accountable. But you are the one that's shamed. You are the one that's put on the pulpit. You are the one that's seen as having sex because you are the pure woman, and only you should stay pure. Because if you're not pure, you don't deserve any other love. You don't deserve any other connection. You don't deserve a white dress to wear down the wedding aisle. You don't deserve anything. So when you think about these things, especially if you grew up in a religious environment, and how depreciating they can be, how they can make you feel smaller and smaller and smaller, it impacts your connection, or can, let's not put that determination on it or that definitive space, but it can impact the way that you connect sexually. Or let's go the opposite way. If you became so afraid because of the way you were taught about sex, that you were never taught really how to connect sexually, right? So you became afraid. And so then in your relationships, you never even tried to have sex because you were afraid. So even when you got into a safe relationship or you get into a marriage, you still are not able to connect in that sexual way because of all the fear baiting. Do you all know how real this is? I hope I'm not alone in this. I don't believe in any way I am, but I'm the one talking about it out loud. But that's the whole purpose of the show, Xpose H.E.R, because the goal is to get you to a space to understand what are these things that have impacted my sexual connection. These first episodes, me talking about my story and just sitting on this couch with you, are here to talk about things that you may have experienced, but you haven't had a space to be comfortable with them, or you've had a space to be comfortable in the space of your girlfriends or whatever the case may be. But the goal is we want to be able to connect in the healthiest way, intimately, sexually, spiritually, physically, emotionally, so that we can have the greatest level of connection. All right. So let's bring it back to the adult self. Here's a couple of messages that I want us to talk about, ladies. We need to know that sexual connection does not guarantee emotional connection. Like, we are built differently as men and women. And if I don't know that sexual connection does not always equate as emotional connection, then I won't be able to communicate to my partner that I need this from you, because in this experience, although you may be experiencing something emotional too, this is what it feels like for me. I need to be able to know for myself that my arousal, my orgasm, my experience is connected to my emotional connection to you. And so then I don't have to live in a performance-based situation, because I am now understanding that I get to experience the release and you also experience the release. And therefore, that's why this connection is so amazing, sacred, and brings us such ecstasy and pleasure. So we need to understand that. We need to understand that when we're in our situationships, when our relationships with marriage, or relationships that are just our relationships, is that if I don't understand these pivotal things, then I will not be able to truly understand what connection is. I've got to understand what I'm seeking. If I'm not seeking emotional connection, that's cool too. But I believe that a lot of us are desiring emotional connection. And sometimes we have gotten to the point where we no longer want it for a reason. And only you know the answer to that reason, right? Another thing that I want you to understand is that when you understand your sex story, you're able to identify when were times in my sex story that I knew how to choose myself, and when were times where I did not know how to choose myself. What do I mean by choosing myself? When we're talking about my story and losing my virginity, was I actually choosing myself, or was I choosing to find a way to be accepted and not be left out? Did I know that then? Of course not. But was I actually choosing myself? Do I know how to ask myself questions about what it means to choose myself? Okay? I'm sorry, this is a big one. I want you to understand the difference between connection and performance, right? Connection and performance. If I'm performing because I have learned that this gets me acceptance, so I can be the greatest sex diva, I can put on all the show, I can read all the things to make you experience to come, or whatever it can be, right? But if I'm only performing, am I actually truly connected? If I'm performing, am I studying you, or am I studying me and you? How do I identify what my performance is based on? Again, when I understand my sex story, I better understand what my performance is based on. I also want you to start normalizing some questions too. Paying attention to, do I actually like this person, or do I like the attention I'm getting? Do I actually like this person, or do I feel good because I'm not the only one that's single? Do I actually want to have sex with this person, or I don't want them to reject me because of my values? Do I actually want to learn how to do this sexually? Do I feel safe with it? Do I feel comfortable with it? Or am I doing it again because I don't want to be rejected? What actually do I want to do? How actually do I want to connect? Giving a voice to that teenager who did not have an opportunity to know that she can ask these questions. Does that make sense, y'all? So understanding what are my questions, giving myself permission to have these questions, so I'm not living in this adult body, but I'm living out of the space of this teenager. Oftentimes we don't understand that that's what we're doing. We are in this adult body, but the person who is leading the narrative, who is leading leading our relationships is that teenager. So when we're talking about all these things, the purpose of this conversation is so that you understand, okay, now that I understand my sex story, if I lost my virginity earlier, whenever I lost it, right? But I'm able to use this current person that's learning to understand intimacy in a different way to go back and get her and say, okay, you got permission to ask these questions. When you're developing a relationship, you have permission to have boundaries. You have permission to say, no, I'm not interested in that. Or maybe I'm interested in it, but I'm going to wait until I feel comfortable. Or it would make me feel more comfortable if you asked me these kind of questions, or if you took your time with me, or if you listened more, or if you held me a little bit more, or whatever it looks like for you, right? That's the purpose of this conversation. Understanding the beginnings of my sex story so that I can understand where I want my sex story to go. It doesn't have to be halted at any stage, honestly, in my belief, until you die. But you have to understand these things in order to get to the next thing. I hope that makes sense to you, all right? I want to say one thing about pleasure too. Like, if you haven't understood your role as a woman, or you haven't understood that sexual relationships are a space to share, you want to understand that these are a shared experience. Pleasure and safety represent a shared experience, a shared conversation, a shared understanding, a shared space of feeling trust and safety, a shared space of exploration, a shared space of when things are difficult, a shared space of when things are uncomfortable. In order to experience true pleasure, pleasantries, connection, it is a shared space, a safe space of connection, a safe space of taking your time and understanding what you feel comfortable with. That is true intimacy, y'all. Okay? That is true pleasure. Oh, another thing is having a conversation with your partner about what emotional connection looks like for you. What makes you feel detached? What makes you feel close? When may you want to perform? When may you want to be the dom and he be the sub? Or you be the sub and he be the dom? When are these conversations important? All of these conversations are necessary, because what we don't realize, y'all, is when we have our level of vulnerability, where we have the freedom to talk about different things, which oftentimes many people don't realize, we're not having freedom in our sexual relationships to talk about things. And so we have things going on in our subconscious that we don't know are impacting our ability to connect. So I've got to understand that these things are impacting my ability to connect in order to have freedom in my sexual relationship, right? So I've got to be able to say these things that I'm curious about. I've got to be able to say these things that I'm nervous about. And I've got to understand, again, when my teenage self that could be, especially like me, if she had some religious trauma, or she had some different things that pop up when she finally got a safe relationship, she's not had permission to have these conversations, right? So you're giving her permission to say, oh gosh, it's so cool to explore. It's so cool to figure out these things. It's safe to ask these questions. This is what connection is. This is what trust is. This is what safety is. And so as you're teaching her that, she finds safety within herself, which allows her to find safety with her partner. So here's the last thing. I want you to learn how to reclaim your sexuality with compassion. That means giving yourself permission to grieve what you didn't know. Rebuilding a new story, one where you're worthy, wanted, and whole. Sis, you are more than your past choices. You get to choose what intimacy looks like for you. So I want to give you permission in this reclamation to reclaim your sex story, to explore what pleasure is and feels like without guilt. To say yes when your body, spirit, mind, and soul align, and to say no when it doesn't. To change your mind, to relearn what you enjoy, and to be curious about your desires. So here's an exercise I got for you. I want you to get you a mirror, and I want you to allow yourself to be in the mirror fully nude. And I want you to look at your body from your head to your toe. I want you to pay attention to any negative messages that might come up, any criticism, anything like that. I want you to allow it to be there, but just keep moving. Then as you allow it to be there, I want you to go back through and I want you to look at each part of your body. I want you to look at your breath and say, thank you for the nourishment. Thank you for the beauty. Thank you for the color. Thank you. I want you to thank your stomach. I want you to thank your vagina. I want you to thank your behind, your thighs, your legs, your feet, your hands, your arms. And I want you to allow yourself to just be in that space of gratefulness for your stretch marks, for your discoloration, for the smoothness of your skin or the roughness of your skin. And I just want you to allow yourself to play music and thank your body for everything that it's walked through and that it's still standing. Thank it for being created. Thank it for being present. Thank it for what it can do. Give yourself an opportunity to start the new experience and the new story with your body. I'm telling you, if you keep this in your regimen, it will be life changing, because you'll look in that mirror one day and say, damn, you're sexy, you're beautiful, you're everything you were created to be. So thank you for joining me today in this conversation. And I want to tell you this: if you ever feel like you gave something too soon, you lost something too early, or you stayed attached too long, I want you to know that healing is your birthright. I want you to know that freedom is your birthright, that restoration is your birthright. There's no scarlet S on your chest. There's no, what is this list that we create, these body counts? It does not make you any lesser. You've got to know that though, right? You've got to know what allowed me to be in these spaces and what kind of healing I want, and how much can I believe that that healing is there, and how can I redefine what I want to experience if I felt that it was bad, if I didn't feel that was negative for me, whatever it is. Permission to have whatever your experience is and redefine what you want to experience in your future. That's your birthright. You get that opportunity, all right? So until next time, y'all, let's keep it bold, let's keep it sexy, and let's show enough keep it real. I'll talk to you soon.